Welcome to another edition of the Educational AD podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to take a moment to say thank you. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to say thank you to our platinum sponsors, including Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gilman Gear, always a step ahead. Camp Mobile, where teams communicate better. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD. Our guest today is Jon Payne. Jon is a certified master athletic administrator, and he's the assistant principal and AD at Reading Community High School in Reading, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati. Jon, my friend, welcome to the program.
Jake, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed listening to some of the previous podcasts here and happy to be a part of this. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, well, absolutely. To our listeners, Jon and I go back a ways. We are both members of the NIAAA Certification Committee, and we've had a chance to work together and get to know each other nationally as well as at the state coordinators conferences. So we're happy that he's on the program. Jon, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and how your love of sports helped get you started into teaching and coaching.
Sure. Went to high school, to Edgewood High School here, just a little north of Reading and Trenton, Ohio. Played 4 years of football there, 1 year of basketball, and 2 years of baseball. Also, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, hopefully, but while going to school, my father was an athletic director. He spent 15 years as an AD at Middletown High School. So that's helped develop my love, of the profession and of sports itself. Went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and then got my graduate degree from Xavier University. Obviously throughout youth, played in all the youth sports of baseball and football, and my dad, again, was instrumental in starting a instructional program for 5th and 6th grade and 3rd and 4th grade basketball. So got ingrained in it very early and often, and have loved every minute of it.
Well, let's go and touch on that. I'm always curious for our ADs we always talk about the importance of leadership and mentoring the next generation. And so I'm always curious about the mentors that you've had. I'm going to guess your dad was probably a big mentor for you, but who are some of your other mentors growing up, either coaches or teachers, as well as maybe people you worked with or worked for?
Yes, certainly Dad's at the top of that list. Being around him, he was one of my coaches, obviously, in the youth programs. He did let us go, me and my two brothers, once we did get into school sports and let other people take care of us from there. But huge mentor in terms of sports and coaching and athletic administration was my father. And then I always say that no matter who you come across in this profession, another athletic director, a principal, a coach, you're learning something from them. It might be something that you're going to incorporate and use, or it might be something that you realize is something you never want to do yourself. So I think everybody that you come in contact with certainly is a mentor, but specifically from the positive end, there's numerous Ohio athletic directors. I could start listing them, but I'd forget somebody and I'd feel really bad about that. But when I first got started, a lot of those guys had worked with my dad and knew him and were more than willing to help me out, which was tremendous. Growing up and going to school, one of our football coaches was with us, my class as 7th and 8th graders. And then as we moved to the high school, he moved to the high school as well, Mr. Fred Keck. He was one of my science teachers and football coaches, and coached me in middle school basketball as well, and developed a great friendship with him. Ended up doing some summer jobs with him, cutting wood and pouring concrete and all that kind of stuff. So I've had plenty of those kind of people in my life that were sport related, certainly. And then as I've moved through my career, again, as you come across people, I think you learn something from them. It's been the joy of mine to be a part of the NIAAA and my state association, and learning from other people other than just those inside of Ohio. But the folks that I've had in contact with, the certification committee, with the coordinators, summits, and all of those things, all of those folks really have been mentors to me. As we always say we're lifelong learners, and that's certainly the case in this job, and the way it has progressed over the years since I started in it in 1999. The job is certainly different here in 2020 than it was in the 1999-2000 school year.
It's always great to hear those stories. Let's talk a little bit about that path. So after graduation from college, how did your teaching and coaching path lead to your first position as an athletic director?
Well, I started off as an elementary school PE teacher. I was teaching elementary school and then also coaching. I coached football, basketball, and track. Actually, the year I graduated from high school, I got a basketball officiating license as well. So I've really never been out of sports. And my license is still active right now to officiate basketball. I'm a little busier these days as an athletic director. And if I do get a night off, I certainly don't want to go call a game, but certainly stayed involved that way. So I started off, I taught there at the elementary level. There was an opportunity to move to the middle school where I was coaching football at the time. So I took that job. I taught middle school physical education as well. And then my very first athletic director's experience came the very next year. I moved up to one of the high schools, Monroe High School here in the area, and was we had at that time, Monroe and Middletown were part of the same school district, Monroe and Middletown high schools. Then the next year, Monroe split and became their own school district. So at that very first year, 1999-2000, we had a district athletic director, and then we had an athletic director in each building. I was fortunate enough to start my career there at Monroe High School that one year. That last year that they were in a combined district as the on-site athletic director, I also taught physical education at the high school level as well that one year. Then the very next year when they split, again, I was fortunate to get that position and spent the next 2 years there. So that's kind of been my path in terms of from teaching and coaching into the athletic administration world.
In your last comment, you mentioned the job of the athletic director has changed since you first got involved. Obviously, technology's had a big change. The fact that we're talking today, we weren't doing that 20 years ago by Zoom or by anything else. How have you seen the job change, the day-to-day job from when you first started to now in 2020?
That would be the biggest part, would be the technology. Back, and I still do it today, but I still hand schedule. I've got paper and pencil, and I do all my hand schedules before I even start to enter them into Schedule Star or into Arbiter or whatever other scheduling software folks may be using out there. And then this year, paper tickets and taking money has gone away. All of our tickets are pre-sale. They're all electronic. All the reports are electronic through that. So the biggest, and then the last piece, I guess, would be the use of Final Forms. And again, I don't know what else anybody else is using, and I'm certainly not a commercial for them, but not collecting all of that paperwork anymore. It's the only two pieces of paper that we collect are where the doctor signs off on the physical telling us that the kid is eligible for participation without restrictions. So all of that paperwork going away, and just the technological aspect, the social media aspect of getting information out and being able to celebrate your student athletes that way and get their successes out. Those are probably the biggest changes. The other biggest change, and it slowly changes every year, is the number of actual in-house coaches that you have. The people that you actually have your thumb on, that you can talk to on a daily basis, that you can walk down the hall and ask them a question or make a suggestion. That has slowly changed over the years, and it gets worse and worse every year. Just the number of people who are teachers and coaches anymore. So there's always a little bit more parental involvement, which can be good and bad. But the biggest changes have been those technological advances, if you want to call them that. But that's the biggest thing since I've gotten started, at least.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the in-house coaches. You're at a public school. I've spent the last 25 years at private schools, and my school right now, we are just so blessed. Almost every single one of our varsity head coaches is on campus, and it just makes such a difference. And I think when you can get, and I know there's always challenges, but when you can get that superintendent, when you can get that principal to embrace the idea of, hey, let's hire great classroom teachers, but let's hire great teachers that can also add something else to the life of the school, even if it's running a club or something. It just really makes a difference. So, that's certainly a challenge across the country, is the diminishing number of in-house coaches.
And it not only makes our job easier because we can walk right down the hall and talk to them, it makes things easier on the student athletes to be able to go talk to that coach if there is an issue, or if that coach needs to seek a certain student athlete out, or if you've got a potential candidate for a team who doesn't know who the coach is, you can just take them straight down the hallway and introduce them. And it just makes that communication so much easier for everybody if you can get them in-house.
Well, 100%. We talk about relationships, and that's where those relationships are sometimes first built, in the hallway, in the classroom, in the cafeteria. So, good luck with that. If you need a recommendation, tell me. I'll call your principal up. You mentioned, you started out your AD career at 2 other schools. When you came to Reading, I always like to talk about this idea of fresh eyes. What were some things that you saw at Reading that they were already doing a great job with, and you just said, hey, we want to keep this going? And then maybe what was something you looked at that, hey, this is pretty good, but I think we can do better?
Well, I would say, for the most part, everything was running really smooth. The gentleman that I replaced is still here in the building. He just went back into the classroom. So being able to have that conversation with him and talk about some different things that they were doing, or different initiatives that he had going. Also, the high school principal here now was a former athletic director as well here in this building. Or in this district. I shouldn't say this building, as we're just in our second year in this building, but he was a former AD of the district. So, having that perspective from him, as well as the previous athletic director prior to me, has been tremendous for me. And then, there's just great people in the community that you can lean on as well to talk to about things. Probably the one thing that I really wanted to shoot for, that I've looked at different places and just never got it started, was a student leadership bunch, or whatever you want to call them, student leadership team. We were the Blue Devil Athletic Leadership Team, is what we called ourselves. And I finally got that started last year. It was a little bit of a struggle, but I was glad I got it done and able to meet with those kids and get some ideas going with them. But so I would say, to come in and make major changes, that wasn't necessary. Things were running real smooth. It was just to add a few things to enhance what we were already doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think that's been a pattern with some of our ADs we've talked to, is that, just come in and, keep the good stuff going and try to stay out of the way of some really good coaches.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people in this profession, whether they stick with it or not. To go in and do a complete overhaul, I would say, is probably very rare of any kind of athletic director's position or program.
Let's go and talk about COVID. Certainly it's had an impact, across the country. We've seen some states cancel sports. Some states it's business as usual. Others have actually moved the seasons, football to spring and baseball to fall. Here in Florida, we delayed for about a month, and now we're, getting up and going, but we still have sections of the state down in South Florida, Miami-Dade, that are literally just getting back on campus as we speak. And to our listeners, we're recording this episode on September 23rd. So, Jon, my question is, what's happening in Ohio right now? What's happening in Reading with regards to return to school as well as return to play?
Well, in Reading specifically, we've returned to school and we returned to play as normal. The OHSA, Ohio High School Athletic Association, the only adjustment they have made thus far is they shortened the football regular season to 6 weeks. And then everybody, which is not always, hasn't been the case in Ohio, everybody gets in the playoffs this year starting week 7. You can opt in or opt out. That's up to you. And if you choose to opt out, then you can play, if you can find opponents, other schools that opted out, you can continue on to get your full 10 weeks of normal play in, but then that it has to end at that point. If you opt into the playoffs and you lose week 7, week 8, again, if you can find opponents and want to continue to play in the sport of football, you can do that up until that week 10 date. So it's been pretty interesting as far as just the whole football scenario and how that's played out. There's been, over the years, lots of people that have said that we need to change our football structure so that everybody, everybody can get in the playoffs like they do in every other sport. And this would be the first really shot at that to see how that works out in terms of the number of teams that do opt in and what it means to the season and the schedule and how teams are able to go about that. So in terms of the state itself, there are some schools that have not started their athletics. There's some schools here in the area that are just, their Board of Education finally opened up their athletics. So they're just starting this week or next week with their competitions. Again, in every other sport that we have here, we've been going since day one like we normally would. Again, the only adjustment being that football schedule. In terms of school, it's all over the place. Some people are strictly virtual. We have a really unique model here, which I'll get a little bit into in a second. And then some schools came back full blow like it was no other year. And again, there's schools that are just now opening up as well, and they have a plan to roll out on a progressive nature how their kids are coming to school. For us, it's an AM/PM model. We have, first off, we have everybody in one building. So our entire district is in one building. We've got about 1,300 students here in this one building. So we have some kids, I think it's like 20%, that's fairly close, that are strictly virtual, not coming into the building at all. And then the remainder of the kids are blended model. So they'll come for bells 1, 2, and 3 on Mondays and Thursdays. And then they will do bells 4, 5, and 6 on Tuesdays and Fridays. Wednesday is a virtual day for everybody. And then on our Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays are split into an AM and a PM session. So we have half of that, approximately 80% coming in on Monday mornings. Then they dismiss around 11:20. And then at 12:30, we start the PM session and they go till 3:30. So then we get the other half of kids in then. So it's really kind of a unique model. It gives me the opportunity to do traffic duty 4 times a day instead of, the usual 2. But for right now, it seems to be working. There's always those kids that are going to struggle, whether it's willfully or whether it's just that's who they are. But it seems to be working for now.
Okay. Another question we've been asking our ADs since we started this revolves around this idea of, social awareness, social justice. Last spring, in addition to COVID, we also saw, this really become front and center in everyone's mind. The events in Minneapolis and Atlanta, a month or so ago in Wisconsin. So my question is, what are some things that we can do as athletic directors in this area to do a better job? What can we do with our kids, our coaches, our communities?
We're already doing quite a bit. I mean, honestly, every athletic director across the country, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic makeup is, doesn't matter what your school district makeup is, you're playing people at other schools that aren't like you. So no matter what your population is, you're going to find some of your opponents are not the same as you, whatever that might be. And we count on a lot of people in the athletic world to do the right thing all the time, whether it's all of our student athletes, whether it's all of our coaches. We're counting on those folks to do the right things all the time. And we're asking a lot of them. And I know that we are asking them to do the right things, in terms of talk to our student athletes, in terms of, what are you doing out in the community as far as community service and community support, and making sure that the kids are aware, that there are people that are different than them and how we should be treating those folks. I think the thing is, in this day and age, we just have to be a little more intentional and deliberate about the delivery of that stuff, about the message that you want coming from your community, from your student athletes, from your coaches. What do you want to be known as? How do you want to be perceived? What is it that when someone says, "Oh, hey, there goes a Reading Blue Devil," what do we want to follow that? Hey, they're doing a great thing. They're doing some great stuff over there. Or, man, I don't think I'd ever send my kid there. That's not what we want. So, again, I say this a lot to a lot of people. I don't know any other profession where they count on the same number of people to do the right things all the time that we do here in athletics, with our coaches, with our student athletes, with our parents in the stands, and everybody else that's just involved with our programs, whether it's your gate workers, making sure that they're being polite and welcoming and helping people out, or whether they're going, the restroom's over there. It's the delivery. And I tell my coaches, and when I teach 502 to a bunch of athletic directors, I tell them, everybody's watching you all the time. So whatever your body language is, whatever your tone of voice is, and however you carry yourself, everybody's going to see that. Somebody's going to see that and make a comment about it. So you got to be on top of it. Like I said, we just have to be a little bit more deliberate and more intentional on what we're doing and what our message is and how we want to be known.
I appreciate you sharing that. Let's go and shift gears a little bit. We always say that, the best part of our job is the kids, and it's true, those relationships. But outside of that, what's your favorite part of being the AD at Reading High School? What gets you excited about coming to work each day?
I would say and not necessarily, I'm going to go away from the relationship with the student athlete. And I just like seeing that smile on their face. If they accomplish something that they didn't think they could, when they win the game that they didn't think, that they weren't favored in, or they weren't supposed to win, or, they get a PR or whatever it is, I like seeing that smile on those kids' faces. Whether they know I see it, whether that's directed to me, all that kind of, the whole relationship thing. Yeah, that's why we're in this business of education. But just seeing kids do things that they didn't think they'd be able to do and get the joy out of that is probably the number one thing for me. Beyond that, it's working with our coaches because they're the ones that are hands-on, probably a poor term, but hands-on with our student athletes. They're the ones that are in the front lines with them and teaching them the things that we want them to do and say and be and how we want them to project our programs and who they are and developing them into young women and young men. So that part of the job, and then the interaction with the other athletic directors, which, unfortunately with conferences being canceled here and not really being able to network as well as we have in the past in hospitality rooms or in meetings and conferences, those are the three things, seeing the athletes be successful, seeing our coaches also be successful, but also developing those young men and women, and then the relationships you forge with other athletic administrators across the country.
I could certainly echo that. I always smile. I'll be closing up after a game or something, and it's whether it's 8 o'clock or 9:30, whatever, a parent will be walking out of the gym and they'll say, "Oh gosh, I'd hate to have your job." And I said, no, you got it wrong. I got the best job in the world. I get paid to come here and hang out with kids and coaches and go to games. I said, you have to come here and watch your kid. I get paid to come here. So absolutely.
Always like trying to hand them my keys and see how they react.
Oh, yeah. No.
Here, you can have it.
They don't want those keys. Yeah. Well, John, this has been great. It's always great to see you at committee or maybe as you alluded to playing some LCR in the hospitality room. But we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're certainly an experienced AD, but right now I'm going to task you with sending out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Jon Payne's athletic director toolbox?
The first one is just some advice to get involved. Get involved at your local level, get involved at the state level, and find time to get involved at the national level and do it right away. It's exactly what I did. I had to fight to be able to go to my first national conference, and it was going to cost me out of pocket, and some guys stepped up and let me stay in their room. But get involved, because the relationships that you'll forge and the information that you'll get from the other athletic directors will be priceless, and it'll be stuff that you'll use for the rest of your life. The second thing I would say is, and it's part of getting involved, is that networking. It is, talking to other athletic administrators. It is reaching out when you have a problem, when you have a question, when something's not going quite right. Don't be afraid to call, and don't be afraid to steal other people's ideas and paperwork. That's why we do this job. And there's numerous things that I have borrowed or stolen or asked if I could use and just put my school name on it. There's plenty of that stuff out there. So just get used to it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And probably the last thing is, make sure you're up to date on the latest technological things. Like I said before, back in 1999, 2000, we did not have half of the stuff that we're using now rather than paper. But I still do, again, back everything up on paper because that's how I learned it, and that's what I'm most comfortable with. But if I had to actually hand somebody something, it might be my Excel spreadsheets that I use for all my financial documentation. It's great because it does the math for me, and I don't have to try to make sure that I carried over the 2 or the 1 or whatever it is and added them up correctly. Excel spreadsheets do that for me. I've got a budget sheet that I've used. I've got some ticket sales sheets that I use, some ticket inventory sheets. So for me to actually hand something to somebody, it would be along the lines of technology, and it would be those Excel spreadsheets for them to put into their toolbox to be able to use and have at their disposal.
I think that's such an important point. I'm glad you made it. There's just so many things out there that have already been done, and you don't have to, as a new AD or even as an old AD, reinvent the wheel. It's out there, and an athletic director is willing to share it, unlike coaching where we try to keep our secrets. And then you just, as you mentioned, you just put your school's name and logo on it, and all of a sudden it's yours. So great stuff.
Yep.
Jon, thanks again for being on the podcast. Continued success this season and this year as your teams compete.
Jake, thanks for having me. And anybody out there listening that has a question they want to run by somebody, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help out. Numerous guys, like I mentioned at the beginning of this show, were there for me when I needed it. And I'll be certainly happy to return that favor if anybody has a question or something they want to reach out. Feel free to use me.
Jon, I haven't figured out how to put somebody's email up on these. So for our podcast guests, what email should they use to get in touch with you?
It'd be JPAYNE at Reading Schools. Reading, you can see here in the background if you see the video. If not, it's READING and then schools with an S, SCHOOLS.org.
Okay. Thanks again to our listeners. Thanks as always for tuning in. Come back again next time for another edition of the Educational AD. Thanks again for listening. Remember, the Zoom video of this interview is available on the YouTube channel. That's Educational AD FIAAA podcast on YouTube. Thanks again.